I want to welcome you and thank you for joining the research journey. My name is Charles Bijimi and I'm the host of the research journey. We have a conversation with experienced researchers. We talk about their experience in the field of research and not just the publications and conference papers, but human realities behind all the work that is being put, the methods, the choices, the revisions, the compromises, and the resilience they face in all the fields. So this is the third episode in season 1, which we titled The Research Proposal, Crafting a Persuasive Research Plan. Now, every experience, every research begins before you even write the first paper or the first word to collect data. You have to begin with a proposal, which we know is a document that you put, and maybe it doesn't come outside for people to see, but it's just between the research person and also the supervisor. So before you meet the supervisor, before they commit to you, before they agree, or you're sending it to funders, before they really understand the importance or the worth to give their time to, you have to write that proposal. Sometimes you have to rewrite it, you go through different stages. So today we're going to talk through this experience, and of course, thank God I have people who have done research proposals at different levels and then different fora, and of course our experience to talk about it. So we're not looking at a textbook version, but looking at a real experience. And then I'm glad to introduce Dr. Nourhan Hisham, who is a postgraduate research associate at the University of Manchester with 16 years of experience in academia. Completed a PhD at the University of Salford in 2022, investigating geospatial social capital networks in the furniture industry. Nourhan's research spans social networks and systems thinking based and nature-based solutions and stakeholder engagement. She was awarded the Dean's Prize for Research Impact in 2021, and her research was developed into £200,000 AHRC funded project. She has also worked as a researcher in delivering nature-based solutions at the Living Lab at the University of Salford, which is part of the £4.6 million ignition projects. Thank you, Nourhan, for joining this session.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
Also, thank you. So I also have Dr. Gilbert, who is also a chartered psychologist at the University of Salford in the School of Health and Society. He has been there for some time now, has completed his PhD in 2023, exploring the vulnerabilities of individuals with fatal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is abbreviated as FASD, within the criminal justice system. His academic journey took him from BSc Biochemistry through to MSc in Public Health and a doctoral research in forensic psychology, each transition requiring him to write research proposals. So he's currently leading international study in confabulation, suggestibility, compliance, and acquiescence in individuals with ASD, recruiting participants from different continents. His PhD was awarded the Professor Lindsay Dougal Memorial Award for Outstanding Doctoral Studies in 2023-2024, and has published in reputable journals such as the Behavioral Science and the Law and Forensic Science International, Adoption and Forestry. He is also an organizer of the TEDx University of Salford and a member of the HMPPS Academic Network. Thank you, sir, for joining me, Dr. Gilbert.
Yes, thank you very much, Charles, for having me. A pleasure and honor to be here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So let's dive into it, starting from the beginning. Now, before either of you I'm going to throw these questions to both of you just to set the ball rolling. Before either of you decided to start writing a research proposal, for the funding application, writing literature review and issues about methodology, there was a question, and it may be just a feeling, but you needed something to be studied. Now, if you can just spend like 4 minutes to walk me through what was back then, your research idea, what was the first thing that started to form? Not just the polished version, like something that you had before it was put into the final, that's the early version, so to say. What was the spark? I'll start with you, Dr. Nourhan.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you for starting the conversation with the idea that it's not going to be polished at the start, because nothing is going to be polished. Nothing is ever polished enough as well, but that's another conversation. But yes, I would say if we're going to start at the PhD, because that's it might be the first actual proposal that you write. You might write something for a master's also, or a dissertation for undergrad, but the actual proposal that you take through as a researcher is usually your PhD. So if we start there, it had to start with me. It was something that I was passionate about. So I started with looking around in the issues that faced cities in Egypt, for example, because this was where my background was, looking at architecture, at urban studies, and looking at where the issues were. And from there, you start contextualizing bit by bit, and this is where the refinement starts. And what I needed to do is to actually make sure that you fit the proposal at the time with a supervisor and with a university. And this is different when you're a bit different when you're applying for funding to funders, because then you have to fit different things. But it's the same concept. You need to fit your proposal and your idea to the right context and to the right people, to pitch it to the right people. And one other thing, and I'm gonna leave the floor to the other guests as well, is to make sure that you are passionate enough about it and you want to take it forward, like you want to find what's wrong with it and to refine it. So yeah, that was where I started with it.
Yeah. Interestingly, passion is important. I'll hand over to you, Dr. Gilbert, maybe to your spark. What was the spark?
Well, thank you. I think Nourhan has really, she's said it majorly all. Starting from something you're really passionate about is crucial. In my own case, the topic I ended up researching for my PhD was something I didn't know about when I was doing my first degree, my undergraduate. It was when I came to the UK, I discovered fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and what struck me was the fact that these individuals were misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed. That set off the passion for me. But certainly, I think it's half the battle when you are passionate about the subject, because the PhD, as you all would be witnesses to, is not an easy journey. And your passion is crucial in taking you through that journey aside other things. So for me, yes, I was really passionate. And then I already had a supervisor who supervised my master's, and it was just a matter of continuing the journey in this area. There was a slight change from social workers to the criminal justice system at the PhD level. But yeah, really, I agree. Passion is really key.
Yeah, passion is key, actually. So let's see if we can move further. I'll go to Dr. Nourhan and ask this question. Like, this is a specific question, actually, based on your experience. Now, your PhD explores social capital networks in Egypt's furniture industry, which sits at the intersection of urban studies, economics, and social science. So when you were first writing the proposal, how did you frame it so that the built environment department would accept a project that was fundamentally about social relationships?
Okay, so the first thing is that research generally is going towards multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, of course. And in that sense, what you would go for, and even back then when I was starting my PhD, which is a bit of a long time ago now, I would say it had to have different aspects to it and different facets, because if it's social research, and it has to deal with people, so it has to deal with cities, so it has to deal with space. And this is where I started looking into architecture and built environment spaces and apartments. And I'm gonna let you in on a bit of a secret that everybody knows if you've done a PhD, is that they don't really look at the proposal at the first instance, rather than look at yourself as a potential candidate. So because the proposal shows potential, of course, and shows ideas, but they know that if you are the right candidate, you will take them forward and you will change them and evolve them. And this is why I was saying the right supervisor as well. So I was lucky enough to meet my supervisor on a personal scale before joining the PhD. So in a workshop setting where you actually meet and you have conversations. And in that setting, I started talking about my proposal, and then I sent it to them. And in that sense, the proposal developed, as well as the idea that I was joining that particular space. So I started doing the changes to the proposal to fit that setting. And this is something that we need to do as researchers all the time. You need to make sure that you're applying the right research to the right place. So that's where it happened for me.
Yeah, I think it makes sense actually, because you said something that like I'm really interested about, what interdisciplinary, like research generally. And of course, you mentioned something about the potential of the candidates, which reminds me of the fact that networking is also important, because the fact that you actually met the supervisor and he had known you and known your potential is also add more chances to actually see you through. I'd like to ask David also a specific question. Your academic path. You went from biochemistry to public health to forensic psychology, and each pivot you require different research proposal. I don't know. I'm just thinking. So when you sat down to write the PhD proposal on the FASD and criminal justice, what did you already know about the proposal writing, and what did you have to figure out from scratch?
Well, so one of the things that was quite helpful was, at the time I was trying to write my PhD proposal, I found a bit of guidance on the University of Salford website, where there's, it kind of outlines what should be contained in the proposal, the word count, the different sections, which I actually followed. And interestingly, that particular proposal writing, because I had already undertaken a bit of research proposal courses of my master's, it was very much a build up on it. And Nora did say something really critical for maybe the audience who are wanting to write this to understand. Usually with the research proposal, it shows an idea, but there's expectation that it will change. And that's what happened to myself. And probably I see Nora nodding and many other researchers. What we write at that proposal level, it keeps changing. In fact, if I bring up my proposal for that PhD and what I finally ended up doing, they certainly look within the same field but different. And multidisciplinarity, really, I didn't foresee it coming, because I came, like you mentioned, from biochemistry, public health, and psychology. The PhD ended up combining public health, forensic psychology, and criminology. So I found myself reading articles on law, reading legislations, reading psychology articles, and it's quite a learning curve, which was not reflected in my proposal. So it is interesting to see how that evolves from what I knew about research proposals and what I ended up doing.
One thing that interests me now, I think, even from this conversation, is about the fact that initially people would just, because I'm from the sciences, I have to do research with people from the sciences, In the social science, I have to research, but it looks like, thankfully, Dr. Nourhan mentioned something about the interdisciplinary nature of research now. It makes sense where the connection is gradually being made in the public, the main issue at the moment. So I think it makes sense to have researchers collaborate in different areas to connect these, because for me, I feel like we are connected to something else. So definitely our research somehow will have a way of, meeting us at different situations or different needs that we address. So I mean, why I'm saying is because we've seen both of you are from, different origin stories, and of course, but you have some common traits as researchers. Uh, it may appear you're coming from different disciplines, and then maybe your reviewers and supervisors may not have the same background. But that brings me to something I was just trying to ask. There's this like tension in proposal writing between what you genuinely want to study and what they like. If you're sending your proposal to funders, what the funders really want to pay for. In that situation, like I know that you've written proposals to different organizations and funders, so maybe you've heard of it. So did either of you feel like you had to reshape the original idea to feel what the funding call was about or departmental expectation, and then how much of the original version you think survived through the proposal process? I'll start with you, Dr. Gilbert.
Well, I think one area was where my experience differs a little is that my PhD was self-funded. And what that meant was that I could really research what I wanted to research per se, but where the change and adjustment came along my PhD journey was the fact that as I kept reviewing the literature, I was identifying gaps that were more pressing to feel like I think Nora did say about matching the research to the setting. What I thought about while writing the proposal when I started the PhD journey, I started realizing the need for adjusting the idea. So whether it's self-funded or through a funder paying for your PhD, there's always the adjustment. My adjustment was not funder related, but it was very much based on the need of the field and the society at the time. And that's what shaped my final output.
Okay. Yeah, I'll head to you, Nourhan. How was it like for you in terms of shaping it? Any different from your original version of the proposal to what you ended up?
I will mention something, but it's not really the PhD. So the PhD for me was always, if it's related to urban studies with looking at cities and spaces, it would have been within the funders' expertise and their requirements. I will tell you a bit about the AHRC bid that we applied for as a research team after my PhD. And that took sort of the same context in a different, with different research questions, if that makes sense. So what I will start there is by saying that right now, when I frame the whole project, I frame it as a research investigation that had different stages. And this is what it was. And this is where Gilbert was saying there is a need, because there are different needs and you're not particularly looking at all of them in the same stage. You have to focus on something, and that's the first thing that they tell you in a PhD. You're not going to solve the world in your PhD. You have to focus on one thing. And but there are a lot of other things that are related to that same topic, that same setting, that same city. And this is where I started looking into further opportunities. And I started discussing with the research team that I was working on, my supervisor, and then we started discussing, okay, there is a need for other expertise, and this is where the research team started growing as well. Because you realize, and one of the things you realize in research is that you can't do everything on your own. You certainly shouldn't. And what is more even appreciated in the field is that you start looking at your strengths and you start pairing them with the right expertise in other researchers, and you apply for the right opportunity. And this is basically what we did as a team. And this is where the project grew from my small PhD investigation to a much bigger climate resilience issue that was looking at heritage within that city, within that industry, because I was looking at it as an industry and like looking at the social capital network within that particular industry from a social point of view rather than from any other aspect. But then there was also the climate vulnerability issue, which I had not considered. There was also the heritage issue, which I was not considering. And in that sense, I started working with the team who had expertise in those particular fields, and we started writing up this proposal. And usually you aim for certain calls, but if it works out or it doesn't, it worked out for our case, but if it doesn't, you usually try to take the proposal and take it elsewhere and look at reshaping it differently to other calls that might come up. And people are usually very happy to jump on board if a proposal doesn't go through in later stages. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm aware that Dr. Gilbert will have to join a meeting at 11. So if it's okay to ask a question, or you want to leave now, that's just let me if it's fine.
No, happy to answer one more question. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm really enjoying this. It is a shame that the timing is just running against us. But please, let me answer one more before I go.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you so much for agreeing to answer one more question. And it's just within your, it's going to be a specific question based on your experience and your research journal.
Yeah.
Particularly in what you have been doing so far and how you have progressed over time.
Yeah.
And now this question is about the FASD and the justice system where you are at the moment. Relatively under, I don't know whether it looks like under research, the research literature base may be thin, but how do you write a convincing proposal? How did you get to a point where you were able to write a convincing proposal when you lean on it to be able to, get a deep body of evidence in terms of what you're doing in the field at the moment to give you the strength that will enrich your proposal or your work that you're doing in your research?
Yes, and interestingly, this area is very much a new area as well. We call it very much a virgin land. There's been not much evidence at all. And this is both a strength and a weakness, so to speak. So in terms of developing a proposal in this area, it's really about showing the gaps that exist abundantly and how your work is going to fit in to fill the gaps. In my case, when I started off, for example, the study I finished as part of my PhD, there was nothing around the world that had done anything like that in the first instance. The only study I found was on 7 adults that investigated FASD within the justice system in terms of suggestibility, confabulation, and compliance. And I picked up the foundation of my work from there to say, look, this is the only evidence that exists only on 7 people globally, and this was since 2011. But what the PhD gave me the opportunity to do was to add on top of that evidence, my own evidence with adolescents, about 52 of them. So from 7 to 52, and now with the fellowship, I've accessed over 112. individuals from around the world. So it could be two ways. You could be really arguing for the opportunity to build the evidence base with your research proposal, or you could be saying the evidence exists, but really there's another angle which has not been done. So for me, I took the first path because there was really nothing that had been done. And in order to also go around that limitation while I was writing up in my PhD, I had to use studies in other neurodevelopmental conditions, maybe like autism and ADHD. They are not the same condition as FASD, but it's kind of showing a bit of similarity to say, well, while there's no evidence in FASD, studies in these other conditions show that people may be vulnerable, and then providing an opportunity for reviewers to see the importance of my work.
Wow, that's interesting.
I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think that will be the question for David. I'm happy that you have been part of it. I know we'll have time to have another session again.
Invite us again. I mean, Nora, we need to probably.
Exactly.
This is so short. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm sorry I have to leave at this point.
Charles will invite us again.
Yes, please. This is certainly a request, Charles. We are going to chase you. You have to invite us again. All right, guys.
No, I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I'm still with you, Dr. Nourhan, and the questions will be specific questions actually on your experience and what you've done. This question may appear a repeated question, but I just wanted to maybe share more light. You've secured funding from multiple sources, including the UKVRI bodies such as the AH, and you mentioned it, different funders, which have different expectations. I know that I've asked this question, but I just wanted to give, do you think, or did you rethink how you presented some of the ideas fundamentally from the main one through the process while you were doing the proposal?
I'm going to mention a little bit of detail because I think it would be very useful to your listeners and to researchers who are looking into getting into funding. Is that there are certain things that are different about different scales of funding. So there are different scales of funding that you'd apply for, especially if you're an early career researcher. So you would either be applying as part of a bigger team, like what I mentioned. So it would be a bigger pot, but at the same time, maybe your role would not be as principal investigator or project lead. But at the same time, there are other pots that you can apply for as the principal investigator, but those would be quite small. So it would be, for example, £1,000 within the department, or £5,000 that ESRC do during, I don't know, annually or something. There are impact funds that are had within the universities, but as part of UKRI. And in that sense, I would say that we are quite lucky in the UK to have such an established funding infrastructure that all you need to do is to actually be active in checking out what's there, in making sure that you are looking at the deadlines and like making sure that you are watching out for calls that are not even open yet. So it's a lot of the time there are calls that have a pre-call page where you can see, okay, they're looking for these particular issues. They need those particular profiles, because this is where you can say, okay, this is too big for me. Maybe I need to start finding more advanced researchers and to join their group. And this is where a lot of research starts. It doesn't have to start with the PI, really. And you start placing the right opportunity with the right ideas, as we said before. And as I said, different funders need different things. So, for example, more formal UKRI calls would be related to the remit of that particular council that you're applying for. So AHRC is more about culture, it's more about social aspects. If you're looking into EPSRC, that's completely different. It's engineering and physics, and they probably need a skill set that I don't have. I'm not sure about you. but in that sense, if you're looking on a call and you feel like the topic is really relevant to your work, but it's with EPSRC, you'd sort of think, okay, this needs to be an interdisciplinary team and I need to contact someone from engineering. And you sort of pick up those skills as a researcher and you grow with them. And after a while, you grow your network, like Gilbert was saying, and you start thinking, okay, this idea fits with that person and those universities. How about we bring the team together? And an email gets people on board, usually. And you get the the ball rolling. And in that sense, if you have enough time and you planned it correctly, you might be in luck for some funding. So yeah, it's there are a lot of details, and I'm keen to mention those details because it's important, because it took us years to understand this. So yeah, maybe we're passing it forward.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you. I think your response answers a little about the third question I wanted to ask, which was about about your, because you've been involved in all these projects over time, and then the question is about how to articulate your role into the proposal where you're not the principal investigator, and maybe how you convert different visions into the proposal with a larger research team.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned a bit about that question and this response you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And,
what I would add to that is that it doesn't have to be all on you. Like, even if you're the PI, it doesn't have to be all on you. What you can do is to sort of, you can delegate, or you can ask people, do you know someone who works in psychology? Do you know someone who works in criminology? And then Charles will put you in contact with Gilbert. And so you don't really have everything clear from the beginning. And sometimes some projects, the bigger they are as well, the more unpredictable it happens. So
I agree with you. I think even with a little experience at CIB at some point, I know that some of the meetings we had, some of the interactions we had, even though it may not be a full-fledged, large funded project, but the interactions was informative enough to know that if you have something like that, you can be placed in different roles to do certain tasks, and which in the long run addresses the project, so to say.
If you remember, Charles, and I'm conscious that some listeners might not be familiar with CIB as well. So
CIB,
So maybe, I don't know if you want to add a link there or something.
Okay. Yes. You are well positioned to just give us a brief about CIB, if you can.
Yeah, so this is, for example, a network. Yeah, just a brief about it. This is a network that puts together a lot of researchers on different scales worldwide, but very importantly, they have chapters in different universities, in different countries, in the UK, in Australia, more prominently as well, and across the world. And the idea is that this network meets up. So the chapters meet up, the academics meet up, they have working groups, they have different themes that they're addressing, all related to construction and the built environment, of course. And in that sense, you, Charles, and we were both part of the chapter for the University of Salford. And if you remember, that was actually quite an interesting point. Is that we applied for funding with Politecnico Milano chapter, if you remember at the time, and it was a small funding. I want to say it was 8K, which is not a lot at all. But it was during the time of COVID. So what we did was online activities and like stuff like that. So it ended up being quite doable with the fund. And that would not have been feasible. We would not know each other. We would not trust each other enough to work together. And the funders, which were the CIB, they were particularly aiming to strengthen those networks between the chapters. So we were funding the right idea at the right time, because it was COVID time, to the right funders. So, and it's a very small example, but this is how early career researchers can start approaching funding, really.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I just want to pose something a bit. I think in previous seasons, we tried to ask researchers about this particular question. Like, it's about the durability of the research question. So, like, I just wanted to, like, at what point did your research question stop being one option among many and became the question, the one that you were going to commit years of your life to research on? Was there a specific moment, or it's something that came up gradually?
Yeah, I'll go back to what Gilbert said as well about the evolving proposal. It's never the first phase or the first version that you submit, but it also can keep changing. So for me, for example, I think my PhD might be a good example, because I changed a lot the proposal in the first year. And some people would say, "Oh, the first year, how did you do that?" It should, like, by the first year you should know what you're doing and what you're talking about. And what happened was it kept evolving. So I started with a certain question, which I was really interested in, about local economies, and that stuck with me throughout the PhD. And I had a chance to change midway, but my passion was looking into local economies and understanding how the city works. But then I looked into a particular setting, which was Alexandria City, and the setup did not feel right, and the questions were too broad. And I even did some interviews. I went there and I did exploratory interviews, and it still didn't feel that it was solid enough. And in that sense, I started looking into other cities and into other contexts where a more doable PhD scale issue might be taking place. And literally after I think it was after or before, I'm not sure actually. I think it was after my first year review that I was like, okay, I need to look into something different, because this needs to change. I was like, I'm getting to a very good question, but the setup is different and it doesn't fit. And I got that feedback as well during that review. And this is where I started looking into Damietta, which is a completely different city, completely different setup. And what I did there is that I took the feedback from the review, and I took the interviews that I did from a theoretical point of view, not from a setup-related point of view, and the literature review and everything. And I started looking, okay, does that fit better in a different city, in Damietta? And this is where I started looking into, okay, Damietta has a specific industry. It's not different economies that are equally there. It's one prevalent economy where I can actually take one case study and work on. And it was a brilliant switch. And this is where I was very happy to contextualize. Everything fits in place, and you will feel it when things fit in place. You will feel it. And I want to go back to one point, is that usually the imposter syndrome kicks in at that point, and you feel like okay, I'm at the end of my first year and I'm still changing the case study. This is not okay. But actually it's fine, because what I want to mention as well is that you would think that I would go into the first year review and I would get like really bad reviews, but that was not the case. It was interesting still because I said, okay, I tried this, I tried that, I did interviews here, I explored different options. I feel like this is working. I feel like this is not really the right fit. And you just put it all on the table, and it's all interesting because it's interesting pieces. But what you need is to put them together, and that will happen. You just need to give it time and to put the right effort into it and not to get discouraged. So yeah, so it changes a lot, and that's okay. That's still fine. Yeah.
You said something which I think most international research students, when they come to the UK, have this, I think have this experience one way or the other. And, moving, like in your case, moving from the Egyptian academia to the UK research funding, like that was a transition, and then just wanted to find, like, I know people have, the context may differ, people have different experiences, like where there are moments where, the proposal convention in the UK surprised you, or you were, as your perspective as your perspective as international researcher gave you an advantage, or so to say. Was it that you had that advantage pre entrance into the UK, or it was something like surprised you when you got it?
It at first it was very surprising because it's quite different from the Egyptian academic context. They're both quite challenging in their own way, and they both have their perks in their own way. So I would say one of the perks that I have and I still have in Egypt is the idea that you're an insider. You sort of get the context more than 1,000 books will give you. And this you bring to the UK context, your knowledge of the field, and at the same time your flexibility to understand new fields and new contexts. So I believe that's a strength that a lot of international students and researcher, in that matter, bring. And in that sense, you sort of jumped into a new context, being the UK for my case, and you start learning everything as if you're learning to ride a bicycle for the first time at 30 odd years. Exactly. And you're like, okay, I don't know. Am I not getting it? Like, I thought I was smart, you know what I mean? And then you start thinking, okay, things work differently. So, for example, it was the first time that I started looking into philosophical stance and what is that exactly? And epistemology and ontology. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm too old to be starting to get this. And then you realize that everybody has their mouths equally open in the session. It's not just you. So you start learning new things. And you need to be open to learning this. As a PhD, it's important, but then as a researcher, you need it to be as agile as possible. Because academia is evolving quite heavily, more into the multidisciplinarity, as I mentioned, and more into tech and more into AI. And like in that age, you need to be quite agile. Pun non intended, but yeah. So in that sense, that's what I started to do when I joined the PhD a lot of years ago, is to start being accepting of not knowing. It's fine if you don't know. You're learning. And one other thing that I really like as well, I'm going to go back to the infrastructure, the UKRI infrastructure generally, is that everything is very well documented and there is guidance on everything. And I find this quite useful for any researcher who needs to learn about anything regarding the funding landscape in the UK. So I would just suggest, just any researcher who doesn't know how to start on funding, just go on the UKRI website and like start reading. They have articles, they have guides and guidance documents. Just go through these. And the other thing that I would say was really important is getting mentorship. it's very important and it's undervalued. Mentorship is almost as important as reading the documentation, because there are things that are not in the documentation. And it's understanding the context in terms of social interactions, in terms of where should your application be okay, because you can apply the same proposal in 10 different things and get none. So you need to know the right context, as we mentioned, and some of that comes with experience, and this experience will probably be a professor who will not apply for a 5K funding themselves, but they will help you get it. So making sure that you have this is important at whichever stage. So right now I'm a postdoc and I still have a mentor at the university, and it's extremely valuable, and I cannot stress it enough. So if you don't have that in place, I feel like this is something that you should try to get either officially from the university or whichever institution, or to build up those relationships with more senior academics who would have time and willingness, hopefully, to help you out and to give you guidance. Yeah. So it wasn't easy, the transition, but it's doable.
I think one of the challenges for in this transition, especially for international researchers, like let me use, mostly like people who have had contact with, is about the writing notes. Sometimes we when we come here, you write something and they said, oh, that's too descriptive. It's not critical enough.
Yes.
And then people go, oh, you get confused. So why does it? So I mean, your mentor would also help you to be able to understand that critical. And of course, you said something about the documentation of things, not just the UKVR, but in most of the times I've had contact with the PhD sessions. There are guidelines to even write critically, so that every person who has a mentor, the mentor should be able to signpost you to where you can get these kind of resources, especially for international students who come to the UK and then you're being questioned about writing descriptively, So, I mean, it makes sense to have a mentor and also to be able to go through that. Usually, just to open your mind to learn.
Exactly. Usually in a PhD, your mentor might be most probably your PhD supervisor.
Supervisor.
But in work afterwards, so if you're a postdoc, if you're a fellow, if you're a teaching fellow, you're probably not going to be assigned someone, or your university will assign you someone. And in both cases, you need to try to create that network around you.
I remember when I started the PhD in the university, I was assigned a personal tutor. I think most people were assigned personal tutor. So I use my personal tutor in areas where I needed help. So sometimes they could also serve as mentors outside the supervisor. And of course, I think the way they do it here, you have two supervisors, the main supervisor and the other person who is the second. So you have a system that makes you have all the things required to do. So
and sometimes it's even more as well. So I'm involved in a supervisory team for a PhD student as well, and we're 3 supervisors. And in that sense, each supervisor brings a different sort of input to the table. And I think it works brilliantly for the student, first of all, and it works brilliantly for the work as well. So it's I think it works. The system works, and that's great to see and to be part of, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to ask you another question. Like I know that some of the questions could go around, but at least there's something I want to pick from those questions. Like, you've been involved in multiple large-scale projects, and you talked to engineers, and how does writing a proposal for a large, project, a large consortium project, differ from, a solo PhD or postdoctoral research? What are the skills that you need to have to develop that? Is there anything different, or the same pattern, the same method?
Well, the writing skills are not too different because you need to write critically, as you said. The difference is mainly experience and strategic overview. So, and that's, I'm not claiming to have that. So that's probably going to be the input of the PI in a large scale project. And in that sense, it's sort of that strategic view that I mentioned of knowing which pieces fit together and how to phrase that and to frame it within the wider research project. Because you have with larger projects, the problem is you have a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different researchers, usually at different universities. You might have industry partners. Usually within the current funding landscape, you usually have industry partners or international partners if it's an international call. And in that sense, each one of those partners has a different need, and they need to showcase their work, and they write differently. If they're not in academia, they write very differently, and you need to harmonize all of that together. And that's where the PI's role is extremely important. Where you'd fit as a postdoc or as a PhD student joining that team is usually supporting or in the write-up. And the more senior you go, you sort of, you have more experience, so you have a glimpse of that strategic overview. And I'm saying that from what I experienced, okay? So what I've seen is that sometimes when I was a PhD student and we were writing something, and I was like, I'm not sure I get it. It's like I get the research, but I don't get why it's placed here, and we're pairing it with that. It's because this fits with the criteria number 1, 2, and 3 in that call. And it's that overview again. It's like knowing, okay, the funders need 1, 2, 3, and your work, it does it, but you need to frame it correctly so it fits within what they're saying as well. Because you can say it beautifully, but you're hitting none of the criteria, even though the work does it, if that makes sense. So it's very different when the scale is much larger. And as a postdoc or a fellow, or because as a fellow you could be a PI, a co-I as well, and even as a postdoc you could be a co-I, a co-investigator. But you need to know as well where your input will be on each proposal, and what is important, and what I believe that part of the strategic overview is to know that you're not over-promising, but you're not underselling. This is very important, I think. And you get that with experience as well as with networking, with getting more involved in research bids. And the funders know that very well, particularly in the UK. They're very experienced in seeing, okay, this is a bit too much. I mean, in a 6 months project, you're promising too much. And that's sometimes, most of the time, that's true. Sometimes it's a good proposal, but you need to apply for a call that is 2 years in order to do that same amount of work. And you need to have that sort of litmus test within your head before applying for a 6 months project with too much work. And this is where, when you scale it down to a postdoc or a PhD proposal, if you're with a PhD, if you're applying for a PhD, it's different because you have 4 years and you can do things in 4 years. But if you're applying for a project as a postdoc or a PhD student, you would need to make sure that you are doing the work that you have expertise in, because you're an early career researcher. You don't have a lot of expertise in too many things. And in that sense, you need to make sure that you are framing it exactly correctly within your expertise. Because the main thing will be, can you do the work? Because you don't have a lot of experience in other things. If you say, I'm going to do carbon footprint calculations, and you're like from a social background, it's going to be a bit questionable. Yeah, so in that sense, you need to look out for different things when it's a smaller project and applying particularly as early career researcher.
Yeah.
The other thing for a small bid that you're applying for, I'm assuming in that context it would be applying independently, is again mentorship. So what they're looking for funders usually, and sometimes they even ask for it, is that if you're applying as a researcher, an early career researcher, you're applying for a considerable amount considering this career stage, then you need to bring in someone who has more expertise in that field than yourself, who would not put a lot of time, but they will guide you. They will be your litmus test. If you cannot see this is not doable, they will tell you. So that's important as well. And it goes back to knowing what you have and what you don't have. Like being your own guide on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're drawing nearer to the end of the session, but I just wanted to, your PhD was later developed into the AHRC funded craft projects. Was that always the plan, or did the opportunity just scale up your research, that emerged after the PhD, or was it something that, how did you make the case for more when the PhD had already completed?
It definitely was not the plan. Usually it's not the plan. Usually you just apply for different things and whatever comes is what you go forward with. And so that was not the plan at all. What happened was there was this call that was extremely fit to the project context and the project theme. And it was a good amount of money as well. So that's important because you're always looking to acquire more funding, because that is a measure of your growth as a researcher as well beyond the PhD. So it's not just important. It's not important for my PhD part per se, because my PhD was going on anyways. But as a researcher, you want to build that profile. So when that call was there, we sort of said, okay, it is my PhD, but there is a lot more that could be done with it. How about we explore further funding? And then I started looking at the further funding section of my PhD, and we were like, okay, we can do this, we can do that, we can do that. How about we get the right team in place? And it grows from there. It's like, and at some point, because that was a bit into my PhD. I didn't have the PhD finalized at the time of the application, but it was useful because it was developed enough that myself and my supervisor, we were both very well acquainted with what I'm doing, and we knew where it could go. And this is where we started looking into. And it's just, you pursue opportunities. And if I would say something, I would say that don't say no to opportunities just because you think, well, it's one thing if you're not doing so well on the PhD and you need to focus on it. If that's the case, then maybe not put a lot of eggs in different baskets. But if you're okay, you feel like your research is going well, don't say no to opportunities. Go for it. Because it's always useful to raise your profile in one way or another. So that's it. To answer the question, it's not planned. It's probably never planned.
So you just be ready for the opportunity and prep yourself accordingly to meet the opportunities, actually.
And the agility again.
And just to, I know that, if you want to go back, so many things you want to say, I should have done this. Like if you want to look back, into your journey, then rewrite something from the first proposal, like, with everything you've known now over the years, what do you think would change in your original proposal? What you know?
a lot would change. So remember when I said about overpromising? I think I was overpromising in that first proposal. But aren't we all? Aren't we all in that first version? Yeah, so I wouldn't overpromise. I would stick to my guns, which you will eventually do. You cannot promise something that you cannot deliver in research. But yeah, so that's the one thing that I would change. But otherwise, I would just let myself go through the experience again. You know what I mean? Just learn through your mistakes. It's fine. It's okay. Yeah. So maybe not overpromising.
I know, not promising. Yeah, you're right. Just do it and then make sure that you're hitting the right things. Actually, before we close, I have a few questions. Actually, just one or two. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Which is about your toolbox. I just want to ask about your toolbox. Like, if you want to advise, any career researcher, one specific practice or habit that has made your research, or had made you a better proposal writer or a research writer, if you want to share.
I would start with reading. I would start that you need to start reading good research.
Yeah.
Obviously publications, like established publications in your field. Looking at how to critically look into issues and how to blend them together. And in that day and age, I would say, please do not write using AI. That is not helpful. It's not helpful for you as a person. It might be helpful for that particular page that you're writing, but it's not helpful to develop that toolkit that you're mentioning. So I would say read good research, critically look into how the different authors are articulating their arguments. One of the things that you hear a lot is the argument. Where is the argument? And you really need to be argumentative within your writing, but towards a goal. And that's a skill as well. I'm gonna have to go back to agility. A researcher needs to be agile. You need to know where to put the research and where to put your time as well. So there is an element of time. If you have a full-time job, it's very hard. Teaching, for example, it's very hard to find time for research. And in that sense, you need to manage your time. Because reading needs time and writing needs time, everything needs time. And I would also say to try different things, to be open to opportunities, as we said earlier, but in a sense that you have a goal to develop your own niche. So in 10 years, where would I want to be as a researcher? What do I want to work in? If I got a lectureship tomorrow, what would I want to teach? So in that sense, this phrases sort of what you want to aim for. And it shouldn't limit going for different opportunities. Like, it's fine. Like, at that early stage, everybody knows that you will have different projects and different papers in different fields. If you can put all your effort and all your publications in the same direction, yes, do it. But if you feel like there are opportunities in different phases and different places and fields, you should go for that as well. So yeah, have that in mind as well. And it's an ongoing journey. It's never done. I mean, I'm saying that as an early career researcher myself, but I know lecturers, senior lecturers, readers, and even professors who are still doing the same practices and same toolboxes, because it's important to keep reminding yourself and to evolve with the times as well. So the technology that senior researchers have worked with 10, 15, 20 years ago are not the same today. So they themselves evolve to work with AI and with technologies that weren't there at the time. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey. So just keep going and don't get discouraged, basically.
So one last question, actually. You've been through the full cycle, like from the proposal, from the research to the publication, and then maybe the output of whatever it is, and maybe sometimes presentation. If you could describe, in your words, just a word or few or two, what research proposal is, if you can just describe in a word or two what research
A
proposal is.
word or
Just
two.
for
I
our
think that's
audience.
very hard to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
whatever, but I'm just saying, well, it could be it could be a sentence, I'm sorry, just in your own words, sorry, in your own words.
um, I'm just pulling your leg, Charles. So I would just say a research proposal is basically, and I want to. It's not an actual contract, but it's a
Yeah,
contract that you morally sign to
yeah,
deliver some good in this world, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's what makes academia a bit different from industry and from
yeah,
other sectors, is that you're
yeah,
trying to deliver, but you're also trying to do good in the world and not
yeah, yeah,
particularly looking at what you get out of it. You, from the, whether it's 8K or 8 million, you don't really get any in your own pocket. You get funding to do
yeah,
work that makes other people's lives better. So if you put that in mind, you will do something that you're passionate about. You will not
yeah,
do something else,
yeah,
and you will promise and deliver, not overpromise.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and you'll make
yeah,
sure that you have the right funding to do it because you want to do
yeah,
it good,
yeah.
basically.
Well, yeah, thanks. That means you've hit that on the point. Never overpromise. Don't overpromise. Just do as and be realistic as you can. Sometimes people show. Sometimes when you see some proposals, they are too ambitious and sometimes not
Yes.
too realistic. So that's the issue. I mean, Dr. Nourhan Hisham, thank you for joining me this morning for the Research Journey podcast. Dr. David was here with us, but he had to leave to attend another meeting. Thank you so much for the genuinely rich conversation we've had. I know our listeners will find this very, very interesting. Of course, a learning opportunity. If whoever is listening and also wants to be part of it or wants to share their own story as a PhD researcher or post PhD researcher, you can reach out to us so that we can have this conversation. This has been the Research Journey, Season 1, Episode 3, the research proposal, crafting persuasive research plan by Dr. Charles Bijimi. Thank you so much, Dr. Nourhan, for your time. You have been very, very supportive, and I really look forward to another session and a decent conversation with you in the research journey. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Charles. Thank you.
Okay.